Welcome back to Cheap Pop, everybody. I'm Derek Kirby, joined once again by my friend Matt Carlin, and today we're actually starting the Rebuild series here, so we're still in Neon Genesis, but it's almost like a jump back to the beginning, just a little bit. It's not quite the same. It's a revisiting, not really a reboot. Lots of discussion to be had there, but we're in familiar territory to an extent. First of all, Matty boy, how you doing?
Good. I took way less notes on this than I've taken in a long time, which made me excited.
Yep. I told you, man. This is 1.11 is like a standard building block, but everything else that's going to come after this, you're going to be like, okay, there are some beats I recall, but then you start going into like a completely different direction where it's like, I don't remember that or that concept. Okay, interesting. So it's the rebuilds are interesting. They're a little bit, I don't know if controversial is the right word. Certainly not in the sense of like the end of the original series, but they're a little bit divisive among the fan base. Some people think they're great. Some people actually prefer the rebuilds to the original series and end of Evangelion. My perception from what I've seen in just the discourse is most people prefer the original series and end of Evangelion as like the final chapter of that. I think there's a lot of good stuff in the rebuilds, though. Some stuff that's very interesting. Obviously, you have this creator who is returning to his work here. This first rebuild movie, which is 1.11, you cannot advance, not being in parentheses for obscure reasons. Revisiting this starting in 2007, so a full decade after the end of Evangelion, returning to his work, and then you get 4 movies to retell this. There's no more series. We get 4 movies that cover this overarching story. And so being as familiar with the world as he is, everything, you're able to explore some stuff in better depth than I think you at times had a chance to before. And then there's just some other stuff that's just like, you didn't have anything like that before. That's actually interesting to see. So there's stuff to like about it. And I can see even in this first movie, just some little stuff where I'm like, oh, that's a nice little nod of world building here that they didn't have before. Because before you kind of had your story that felt like it was in a bubble. And this feels a little more expansive where you see some of the inner working parts of the city, the people and things like that, like the infrastructure. But yeah, so what were your initial thoughts coming back to this?
Well, let's start with the negative. Shinji's voice.
I told you.
I honestly feel like it fits my hatred for him a little bit more, just because he's
Eagle, not your favorite. I think that's the guy's name. The voice
it's like he's been such a whiny little bitch that like now that I hear him being a whiny little bitch, it's like, okay, well this fits at least, but yeah, it was hard. I don't feel like anyone else's voice was killing me. I definitely don't love Misato's kind of crackly voice. But it's not terrible. I can deal with it. Shinji's voice is rough. I don't think I hate it to your level, but like it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Misato voice. Is another one that grinds my nerves a little bit. But I'm like you. I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. The Shinji one, it takes me a minute to get used to it. Like anytime I restart the rebuild, I'm like, I know the Netflix dub gets a lot of crap, but I at least like the Shinji voice a lot better.
Yeah, I need them to get on the Netflix train for sure. I love just how everything, like I felt like all cards were on the table instantaneously, which I enjoyed because that's something that kind of pissed me off with the original. I was just like, dude, can we just get to the point? Like, we all know what's happening. Stop pretending like it's a secret at this point. But now they're like, oh, you thought we were keeping secret? Here's everything that's ever happened in the first of 3, which is incredibly confusing because I'm like, where are you going to go with this? I feel like you've already just thrown all your cards on the table.
Yeah. It's like 6 minutes in, and they're like, and this at the heart of our bunker. And you're like, oh, they're going to show Adam. Well, Adam, they're like, is Lilith. And I was like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
right out of the gate, you're not only showing us the seed of life there, but you're actually talking about like the fruit of knowledge versus the fruit of life. And you're talking about like, this is Lilith. And it's like, holy shit. Like you said, stuff that we didn't get until like episode 22, 23. They're just like, cards on the table. Here's everything. Like, whoo, okay.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
You can tell that the animation's a lot different too.
So nice, yeah.
They like really got to like build things out that I feel like they were trying to accomplish originally, just didn't have the time to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like, I don't even know what I'd classify it as. It's like, it feels like it's pulling towards like a 3D type animation.
A little bit.
And then there's some stuff that I'm like, man, it feels like we're in like Dragon Ball Z world right now. Like, so like Shinji in like the cockpit, just like,
yeah,
just, you know,
yeah, there's
full Super Saiyan.
It's an interesting blend of stylistic choices that they go with here, and it's one of those things that can be a little divisive among the fans too. I like it because like I like it mostly in the sense of it being different from the original series, because like whereas the original series had like the animation budget and all of that, this feels like a movie event. Like you watch a series, it's good, the animation, everything's good, but now you get like these full loaded budgets, and so all of a sudden everything has like an extra layer of polish and everything to it. They're blending the animation, traditional animation, with some CGI and computer graphics and stuff, and so it's just really a nice kind of combination where it just feels like it fits. Like, okay, yes, you're re-exploring this a little bit, but you're doing it on a bigger budget and like with a broader vision at this point. Not figuring things out as late in the game as you did. You're going to go cards on the table, so we're immediately setting up that this is going to be like a bigger story potentially, which is already kind of wild to think about, but it makes sense to me. So like if this was just it by itself, I'd be like, okay, nice. But in that contrast, it feels like a natural progression instead.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and you're not like absolutely dying of boredom as I feel like you do a little bit in the series. Like sometimes you're just like, okay, come on, we've been through these beats before. Like I don't need this slowness here. Like, can we just like get to the point? And I feel like this just bumped up the scale of everything. Like we got to really feel this world, which, you know, talking about 3D versus 2D felt very two-dimensional, whereas now that world feels incredibly real and everything scale. Even just like, we'll get into this a little bit more later, but talking about like the final fight scene, I was like, holy crap, this is like Godzilla level fight, as opposed to just like, it was cool in the original one. This is like taking the scale and the intensity to the next level, like by far.
Yeah, for sure. So in our opening shot, there's a lot of interesting discussion about like this, like if this is like a retelling, if this is a continuation. And there's immediately some credence to the fact that this is sort of a continuation of the original. The first thing you see when we open up is, oh, we have Red Sea everywhere, just like we had at the end of Evangelion. Nowhere else has that been a thing in the Evangelion thing, so I guess we're somehow continuing from that. And there's other things in this too, like not just them talking about some of these elements, like we talked about, like cards on the table, them laying certain things out up front, but there's other little clues and stuff that hint at like this being a continuation, like either not directly from that, but like the cycle of time and everything has run its course, and now it's like a repeating cycle. So it's like all of the course of history occurred as it did in the original series plus end of Evangelion, and now it's like it's looped back, and now we're just back to a similar point in time, but sort of like distorted ripples in a pond when you throw a rock or whatever. There's changes in variety the further away from this like impact moment where things diverge. So it's an interesting kind of exploration there, but that was something I was excited about too. Immediately seeing the Red Sea, I was like, ooh, okay, so we're not erasing everything that happened before. We're now like enhancing it. Like that is like the point at which like if history or time is a straight line, this is where we get those branching paths now where stuff is kind of out of step because of End of Evangelion and Shinji's decision at the time.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of want you to dive more into that because I would say my brain is having a hard time grasping this.
Yeah.
So are we saying like
Welcome to the rebuilds.
this was like, you know, Shinji and Asuka like rebuilding a world and then we're back to a point in time, or this is just like another alternative of what could have happened, or
my interpretation, and because it's an interpretation, I don't think it's spoiler territory. I think that we don't know what happens from End of Evangelion other than we are under the assumption that everyone, if they want to, can come back from human instrumentality, just wash up on shore like Shinji and Asuka did, when they're ready, if they're ready, whatever. And I don't think we see the end of that timeline and what's rebuilt. I think that it spawned probably alternate realities that went through their own similar cycle, but certain things are different. One thing I noticed as well right off the bat, Shinji seems older to me. He almost seems like just his face and like body and stuff looks like he's more like he was at the end of the series and End of Evangelion than what we saw at the beginning of Neon Genesis, where he looked almost like a 13-year-old or something. You know, he still looks very boyish. Then this is kind of like he's in that awkward, almost more gangly sort of phase. And so I think this is a ripple where the timeline looks a little different. I think this is, but because of that, a different Shinji, essentially. Like, it's still the same Shinji with the same traumas and histories and things like that. But I think the way that he's responded to it is different. The personalities of the two Shinjis between the series and rebuilds is different. I actually feel like this Shinji has a little bit more like piss and vinegar to him, a little bit more spine. Don't get me wrong, he's still Shinji. But I think he's got a little bit more to him, like just little comments and stuff. He'll make smart ass comments here and there where I'm just like, okay, all right, you're at least kind of putting up a little bit of fight for yourself. Like later on when he has, pull my mic. Later on in the thing, he has this confrontation with his classmate Toji, and in the series, he just kind of was like, well, it's not even like I want to do it. And in this one, he's like, why am I getting beat up for this? I did the right thing. Like, the way in which he's voicing his, like, defending himself doesn't sound like a meager kind of weakling thing. He's almost just like, it's almost like his tone is like, this is bullshit. Why am I taking heat for this? You know? And it's just like, okay, that's a different Shinji. I kind of like that. So yeah, there are things that you'll see, like, as we're watching, there are things that feel similar, characters who feel similar. They're not necessarily similar, and it might be subtle. It might be something that you might not even notice for a while, and then when it does get finally like put in front of your face, the difference, you're like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I didn't realize that was what was happening. You're telling me that was like it tipped right out of the gate. You know, they like show you that, like they're telling you that up front, and almost like, did you pay attention? No, don't worry, we'll get back to it. It's that sort of thing. So it does make you pay attention. And I respect that, because even though you're watching a lot of stuff that, like we talked about, the first 1.11 feels very much like the first 6 episodes, essentially. And so for that's why it was the last one that I actually acquired in my collection of the series. I actually have all the rebuilds on Blu-ray. And it was the last one I had already ordered and was waiting for Thrice Upon a Time to come out, which is the final one. But that finally came out. But the last one I acquired was 1.11. And it was kind of because I was like, it's the first 6 episodes. I mean, yes, some things are different, but it's nothing crazy. And so I just wasn't in any rush to do it. And it was literally just to complete the collection that I did it. So, but watching it back, you know, I do have some greater appreciation for it. And then I do look at some stuff now and I'm like, they do show you a lot of stuff up front, like you mentioned, tell you a lot of things up front that you might not have noticed before. And so it just makes it a little bit more refreshing, I think. So do you want to kind of lead us through the general setup here as we move through it? We don't have to hit every beat because, like we said, it's the first 6 episodes sort of, but we can touch on the things that stand out different.
Yeah, so the first things in my notes were, do I remember anything? No, I don't. Okay. I feel like we've gone through so much, and I'm like, man, what were the first couple of episodes like? Because I feel like even though we went through them pretty quickly, it feels like forever ago already because there's so much stuff that's come to pass.
Yeah.
So like the first thing I noticed was Shinji when he's calling Misato, because I feel like, you know, in the first I was just kind of like, am I into this show? Am I not? And like I wasn't paying enough attention. I never realized, and maybe it wasn't in the first one, did he have this sexy picture of her
Yes,
with
and
her phone number
it's
on
the
it?
same pose, same everything. That's what Misato sent.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
And
she's just like, oh yeah, give me a call. Here's a picture of me in a bathing suit.
yeah, it's like her bent over and you can see down her shirt and see like her bra and cleavage and everything. So there's an arrow, and in Japanese it translates to and this is a rough translation, but it basically translates to I bet you enjoy this or something like that. Some sort of thing where it's just like Misato is just probably like, oh, this is a cute photo and this will get a reaction out of him. This is kind of funny. I'll send this. Like it seems like that sort of thing. But again, always has to play into the Misato thing of the other broader discussion people try to force about that from End of Evangelion, especially. So yeah, that photo was there. Same pose, same everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a play like everything else is. You know,
Yeah.
it's always about how do I manipulate people with sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then we got the first appearance of Rey
Did
with
you
her like
notice? Did
red
you
eyes.
notice? Yes. Did you notice that they mentioned cell phones as well? That was a difference. When Shinji tries the call initially and he doesn't get through, he makes a comment like, "Yeah, no signal on my cell phone either." I was like, "Oh, okay." So again, just because he was then making the series again in 2007, basically, it's kind of like, ah, yeah, this is a technology. I should at least have reference of this. So like, you're gonna have Evangelion with cell phone technology in it now, and it's like that could be interesting later on as we look at certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Continue. That's just like a quick like blink and you miss it line of dialogue.
That's funny because I didn't even like think of cell phones not being present in the first one,
Mm-hmm.
which let's see, how old would I have been? Cell phones were a thing, right? Back when he made the
I mean,
show
the
originally?
technology, yeah, the technology would have existed by like late 80s, early 90s, but it didn't go like
Not to this level.
broad until
Yeah.
like early 2000s, probably. Like it was, yeah, like probably 2002, 2003 when I feel like it started blowing up and everyone started having a cell phone.
Yeah, I love those old, you know, sorry, quick little tangent
Yeah.
is when you watch a movie and they're like trying to figure out a way to not have cell phones. There's one in particular I remember. It was
Star
like
Wars.
a Wicker Park, which is like obscure movie, but the whole movie doesn't make sense if you have cell phones.
Yeah.
And they just kind of like gloss over that. They're like, everybody's just making one call on a landline, leaving a message, and then if that message doesn't go through, they will never speak to that person again.
Wow.
So it's like this just does not make sense. I appreciate you trying, but like you need to set your time period back if that's gonna
Yeah.
be if that's gonna like hold you up.
Nice. Yeah. No. But yeah, so you mentioned Ray 3, the glimpse of that. We actually got that in the original first episode as well. That same exact thing. He sees someone in the distance. We have not met Ray yet. We don't know who it is. It's Ray 3, which we found out later on. And just like before, he hears something, looks away. When he looks back, she's gone.
Yeah, and that's like I'm trying to think of how many times I probably missed her appearing in the original series because I wasn't looking for it at that
Yeah.
time, or
It's
I
not
wasn't.
like an overwhelming number, but there are 2 or 3 instances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the more and more like coming back to this first fight battle, why were they so ill prepared? Like they knew better. Like they had technology built for it. They knew they had an operator that they could have like reached out to. Were they just so unknowing of the timeline of when this was going to start?
So here's one thing I love about the rebuilds. If you noticed it in their conversation for this first battle, back at the start of this, Nerve actually reports to the UN. Whereas in the original series, they're just already like their own independent thing, have usurped everything. And
Mm-hmm.
so like they're like, Misato talking down to the Navy commander or whatever for the UN in episode 8. Like he has no authority over us anyway. Whereas in this, like Gendo, it's like because they are unproven. Like, yes, they've been made for this purpose, but you would make a division like this and then have it report to someone else. And so Gendo and them and Nerve are going to have to basically step in. First, they have to like pass this first sort of test when they have to get the permission to be sent out and engage with the enemy. And then they have to actually like politically maneuver to usurp that UN approval. So like that's just an extra little element that I was like, that's a really cool idea to have in this. And that's something that until this rewatch, I was like, I didn't notice it's different here. And that's actually refreshing because that makes sense. It would be set up that way at first.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, man, just think of how much is like relying on the fact that Shinji needs to get picked up and survive. And they get so close to that not happening, which would have destroyed their entire plan. Like,
yeah, but I think back then Gendo really did have, and it was that way too in the original series at one point. He really does think Rei could probably just as easily do it, but then Rei got injured in that experiment, that test synchronization with Unit Zero. And so I think because she was on the shelf and nearly died, he probably looked at it and was like, maybe I should at least have the backup. And so I think that's what all that's about. Yeah, some of the lines of dialogue are interesting too. Like when they reference when Gendo and Fusky are talking about the attack and everything, when the Angel is able to put up its barrier, its AT field against the military's explosives and missiles and everything, they're like, oh, so this confirms our AT field theory. And it's just like little things like that. I'm like, that makes sense. Why would they have known Angels had this previously? Like in the original series, they're just like, an AT field. I'm like, but how would you know they have those? Like, how would you know what those are? Like they're actually like, it doesn't tell you why they had the theory or whatever, but it still feels like they're at least figuring stuff out, confirming stuff sort of as they're going. I guess you could say that the Dead Sea Scrolls or something might have told them, but that's like Sele who has the reading of that. It's not clear what Gendo is aware of beyond what Sele lets him be aware of previously. So yeah, so you got this whole attack going on with like the original series, the first Angel, which they're referring to the Angel numbers differently here as well. I'm trying to see like what number they refer to this one as, but it's different than what number Angel they called it in the original series. So I don't know why the rebuilds change up the Angel number. I think it's because they just realized we're not going to do 13 Angels or whatever like we did before, or if we did, we're not going to follow the exact count where this one is like the third one or this one's the fourth one. So it's a little bit different, but the Angel designs and their names and everything are still the same, I believe.
Yeah, I'm amazed that Masato's car, I think this is really the biggest like thing about the series. How did her car survive this long? Because that car got wrecked and she is still driving that thing up until the end of the series. Doesn't make sense.
Dude, she still got 12 more payments left on that thing, and insurance doesn't cover N2 mines.
Yeah, she's like, I hope they don't do this.
Yeah.
Yes, so we get into the next part. They talk about, as you said earlier, they go into the Tree of Life, Tree of Knowledge, which, man, yeah, that feels like, I mean, if I was watching this for the first time, I'd just be like, oh, yeah, cool. But knowing how long it took to get to that in the original series, it's like, dang, I feel like that's a pretty far along thing that we got, and now we're getting it straight off the bat, which is cool. I made a note here too. I said, Shinji sounds like Kermit from Muppets Christmas Carol, and I could not, now every time I see him talking, I'm just like, oh, hey guys.
Yeah. Man, now that's going to be in my head too, so interesting.
Did they have this car escalator into Nerve originally?
I think they changed that. They just made it a bigger loading platform. They had like the very slow escalator thing that was still like hundreds of feet tall, but now it's like an actual platform for a car, which I'm like, that does make a little more sense.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I also don't remember, and maybe she wasn't, but I don't remember Masato not knowing where anything is. Like
that was there. Not as it's a little different, but she was quick to say like, I'm still kind of new here, so I'm a little turned around, and it is still Risuko who has to come and find them on that elevator eventually.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't remember the scale of Nerve seeming so large before. Like it seems massive when you're seeing it through this imagery.
Yep.
So I like that. I like seeing like, wow, this is a huge facility. Like no wonder she's getting lost. Like there's a whole civilization down here. It's crazy.
There's one line Shinji makes in regard to his father. So when Misato was just trying to like talk to him in the car, and she's like, "Why aren't you asking more questions?" Like he gives again, it's a different type of Shinji answer, but he's like, "I just figured adults wouldn't tell me anything anyway." Like it's very much like the snotty nosed teenager almost kind of thing. I'm just like, I just assumed you weren't going to be honest with me anyway, so I didn't care to ask. And it's just like, oh, a little bit of biting criticism there from Shinji. But when he's asked about Gendo, he uses the word dad rather than father. And I was like, that's weird, because dad to me is a more personal connection, whereas father feels like a very almost like emotion removed
technicality.
Like,
it's like, yeah.
So him saying that about Gendo, using that word, I was like, okay, that's interesting that in revisiting this, he's making the starting point of that relationship seem less strained than it did, because it was already immediately strained in the original one. Here, it's almost like Shinji is, maybe he's just trying to express Shinji still being hopeful that like, because Gendo did finally send for him, he thinks like, oh, maybe things can heal. Maybe we can fix this. And so it's almost like he's speaking somewhat hopefully using dad instead of father. It was one of those things that like, for those who are like a Dragon Ball Z fan, Vegeta never calls Goku by Goku. He calls him by his Saiyan name, Kakarot. But there's one time in the Funimation dub where they mess up and have Vegeta call him Goku, and it's just like, oh, that doesn't sound right at all. Like you hear it and you're just like, no, that would never be said. This was almost what Shinji saying dad instead of father about Gendo was. I was like, what? Is that implying you guys have a better relationship? No, I refuse this. I reject this reality.
Yeah, I also, so when we get into Rey being a pilot, and I'm looking at her suit, and I don't remember if the first suits were like this, and I didn't go back and check because I'm doing a terrible job of figuring out the information on my own. But she has like a red bubble, and which is like a core, but Shinji also has the same. And I don't recall that from the original. Was that a thing?
It's a new design element.
I like it.
Yep. Yeah. I popped the second I saw it too, because I didn't remember that until rewatching this, and I was like, I was the Leonardo DiCaprio was it Wolf of Wall Street meme where he's like sitting up and like pointing at the TV. I was like, core, it's on their suit. Oh, that says so much. I was like, yes, that's awesome. So yeah, little stylistic choices like that, something that doesn't even have to be spoken or really talked about. Just little things like that, I feel like are adding a lot to this early on, where, I know we've been talking at this point already for like 27 minutes or whatever, but like in probably what has amounted to 10 minutes of screen time, I'm like, we've already added a lot of stuff to the conversation, like raised at least questions of like how this could be different and like where it could go from here. And it's like, this is intriguing. Like I'm actually kind of invested in this. It's not as much like, all right, yeah, we got 1.11, just, shorthand notes. We'll talk about it. There'll be like one or two differences and then we'll move on. It's like, no, there's plenty of stuff here. Like, it's not a long set of notes by any means, especially when we were doing the last episodes of the series. But, going through it again, I was like, I actually have a lot more to say about this than I thought I would.
Yeah, same here. I was like, we're going to get through this quick. But now I'm like, yeah, there is a lot of change here, and like a lot of like welcomed change too. I enjoy it. So I'm interested to see how the other two are going to fare.
Yeah.
I feel like shit's going to get crazy.
Oh, yeah. So when Risuko finds them on the elevator, Misato and Shinji, she introduces herself before taking Shinji to meet Gendo. We also see Gendo leaving while he's like, again, the angel attack is going on. He basically leaves Fuyutsuki in command as he goes to meet with Shinji. And Fuyutsuki gives us something that's different as well. He comments almost wistfully that it's their first meeting in nearly 3 years. And I was like, okay, that's different too. Our timeline was different for how long Shinji had been gone previously. And hearing him speaking almost wistfully of that was like, oh, that's kind of implying Fuyutsuki not being almost equally cold and, bitter as Gendo. Like, he's kind of like hopeful of like, this is a good thing. They're finally coming back together. And Gendo almost like, yeah, he's leaving Fuyutsuki in charge, but like something about just his attitude heading into that meeting too feels different, where I'm like, again, we're not as strained of this initial meeting as we were before, even though Gendo will absolutely still be a dick. And so I'm just like, I'm kind of curious to see like how we try to like have it at least be on tepid ground before we tear it apart. Whereas coming in before, it was already torn apart, and then we just had to like, I don't know, separate the pieces further.
Yeah, let's see. So after that, we see Unit 1 for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm,
Well, the first new time. And this was another thing I liked a lot and mind you, I do not remember the first ones very well. So
Okay.
if this happened, I missed it. But
Okay.
how it's like held in. So we always see kind of its top part, and that's supposed to be like, oh, yeah, it's huge. Like you're only seeing a very small portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like walls being moved in order to like decouple it from where it is, which I liked because then I'm like, man, this thing is massive. Like it's so large, and the way that they portray it, and I know that there's some new imagery there, so there's definitely some stuff that at least was not in the original, but I loved getting to see, because I mean, like seeing it in relation to a building doesn't do much for me.
Sure.
It's like, okay, cool, it's a guy in a zip up costume, it's Godzilla. Like that doesn't mean anything. I want to know how big it actually is, and when I get to see like just how much work is going into like just keeping this thing kind of in its place. It's cool. I like it. It builds the scale more.
Yes, and again, like you said, there might have been something like that in the original series that kind of did this, but in the rebuild, it's very clear that he's going deeper into this level of detail to really give you a sense of the scale and like the level of effort that goes into like any of the things they're having to do, which is a very nice touch. So basically, the meeting kind of goes the same as before. Gendo wants Shinji to get in the pilot. Shinji is very apprehensive. They're trying to kind of explain to him like what he would have to do, how he's kind of being pushed into this thing. And when Shinji's initially like just saying like he can't do it or whatever, Gendo's line, it's almost a throwaway thing because he's not even saying it like to Shinji, but it's very much in a sense that Shinji can hear it. He calls for them to send in Rei, and he refers to Shinji and says, he refers to him as the spare part. He says, the spare part isn't working. And I was like, oh, and Shinji came in hoping to fix this. And he's like immediately in front of him, like, all right, the spare part said no, get the child that's like at death's door. We got to send her in now. I was just like, God, Gendo, you are such an asshole. Yeah, this is in my notes where I had the Angel Core comment too, because I wrote in my notes, I was like, Rei wheeled into the platform on a gurney just like before, yada yada. Is that a goddamn Angel Core? All caps. Yeah, I popped huge for that. I was like, yeah, like before she tries to get up, but she's winded. Then a blast from the Angel attacking the base knocks her to the ground. Shinji tries to help her up, and you see, I felt like there was more emotion in her face. Like I felt like you saw pain and even fear in her eyes, whereas Rei 2, as we come to later realize she is, it was a lot more monotone. So like seeing like that little hint of fear in her face as well, I was like, oh, is Rei gonna also be a little bit different? Okay, interesting, cool. And Shinji agrees to pilot Unit 1, and they're kind of just trying to coach him up like how to go about basic movement and stuff. I also don't like a dialogue change they make for him. Instead of saying don't run away, he's saying I mustn't run away. I'm like, what are you, Shakespearean? What 14-year-old says mustn't?
Yeah,
just leave it alone.
A little much.
Yeah, just leave it alone. Don't run away. It's more than fine. Like it's more so, it's actually better because don't run away, from like the tone of the voice and how it's directed, it's like what people would tell you. If I beat you over the head forever and tell you, stop running away, don't run away, don't run away, then when you tell yourself that, it's almost like you're hearing that external voice turned against yourself. So it's like, as you're trying to hype yourself up, you're really beating yourself down with that external negative toxic voice. Whereas I mustn't run away, you're like trying to take that ownership of it, and it doesn't carry that added weight of the other one. So I think it's a downgrade. That's another one. And I don't remember.
He's a theater kid.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. I don't remember "Don't Run Away" or "Mustn't Run Away," whatever, being as beat to death in the rebuild as it was in the original series. I say beat to death; it was probably used 4 times total. But the theme is there, of course, but it's not hit as heavily, so maybe it won't bother me as much. But that's one where, just as I was hearing that line of dialogue, my face like morphed into a frown. I was like, no, leave it alone. Why'd you mess with the dialogue? It was fine. You animate the wall moving for the stupid Ava to move. Give me the angel core on the suit. I love those, but don't tamper with shit that doesn't need to be tampered with. It was fine.
So in the original, when he goes, and if I'm jumping ahead of where you want to be, stop me. But
Sure.
when we get to the cranial damage part of the fight, was there mention in the original of them disengaging him from the Ava? Because I feel like we focus so much on that later in the series.
Yeah.
About like, oh, I hope we disengaged in time, but we never talk about that in this version or the original for this fight.
I don't think there is. I think that's something, again, kind of riding by the seat of their pants. I think it's a concept that was more introduced later. And so they realized, like, that's a little bit of a plot hole, isn't it? So let's at least have a line of them trying to do it here. And so I think they just had to take a different approach to it because of that. So little things like that, how they try to fix inconsistencies or small plot holes.
I don't think they did it in this version. I don't think they said anything about it.
I thought they had a line of saying they were trying to and it wasn't responding. That's what I thought I recalled. But I'll check my notes when we get to that part. The couple other things I had real quick. Quick touch on notes. Risuko comments on how impressive Shinji's sync rate is, given there is no plug suit. Apparently, it's 41% already, his very first time in it, which is, I guess, good enough to operate the unit. I would have thought 41% is not enough to operate it, less than half, but operates just fine. And then I also noticed that Unit 1's design is a little bit leaner than it was in the OG series. And I'm speculating, again, anyone listening to this is based on the basis that they listened to all the episodes before and everything. They know the twist of what Unit 1 is. My guess was the redesign was in part to give it a slightly more feminine appearance. Again, a lead in towards it being Shinji's mom, or just a female soul, whatever in it. And the speaking to that end as well, the sounds, the screams of Unit 1 in this are much more feminine as well.
I feel like there's a lot of screams.
Yeah.
Even especially the angel later, it's like, oh my goodness, this thing's scary.
I like it though. It makes it not feel just like before it almost felt like a robot, like the Ava thing itself. And most of the time the Avas don't scream unless it's like going berserk or something. So I actually like them giving like sounds of pain or distress from the angels, because it's like, yeah, if these are a potential of what humanity could have been, it's interesting to see it like expressing pain and fear and things like that, anger even. Like I was like, that's a nice touch. Makes sense. Let's see here.
I will say that like watching it go berserk, and not having a cut and like waiting for our next episode was so nice. Just like seeing that fully through and not having to take a break in between it was so much more impactful than like, oh, shit went crazy. Wait till the next episode, then we'll talk about it. It's like, no, I've already lost all my hyped by that. But no, I really enjoyed that. I was like, man, watching this as one scene is really fun.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting when Unit 1 goes berserk. Misato and Risuko both seem to understand and are afraid of that happening. Like there seems to be an understanding there. Now Risuko, I would have, kind of, because she's always like the next step down from Gendo in terms of knowing shit. So that one didn't surprise me, but Misato kind of seeming like she also understood. I was like, oh, okay. And then Fuyutsuki kind of commenting to Gendo, like, we've done it. I was like, oh, okay, we're really going all cards on the table early on here. Like, basically saying, like, yeah, we knew we were throwing him into this situation because we were intent on making Unit 1 go berserk. So we made sure to send him in with zero preparation.
Which, did they talk about that in the originals, or was that for this rebuild?
I think that's for this. Because they have the Dead Sea Scrolls, they know supposedly about when the first attack should occur. I think they intentionally waited to send for Shinji until the day that they were expecting the attack. And Misato comments on that too. Like that's kind of suspicious. And that it's the commander's kid of all people that I'm supposed to go get, that's really suspicious.
Yeah, the knowingly going berserk, it's just, I mean, I like that because it's like, man, because before it just felt like you waited till the last minute, you made an idiotic decision,
Mm-hmm.
like it turned out well for you, but like just luckily. But this seems like a lot more intentional, which,
Mm-hmm.
for Gendo's character is like, you've got to think he's methodically thought every single. I mean, it's been a chess game for him before it even started. So
Yep. So after the whole lobotomy and all of that happens, Unit 1 goes berserk, Angel fighting back, being overpowered. Unit 1 tears off its arm and regenerates it by taking part of the Angel's body, which I was like, that's kind of cool. I don't recall that. That's pretty intense. And then the Angel attempts to self-destruct, but Unit 1 still walks away unscathed, and everybody's just like looking on in awe, except for Gendo, who's just like smiling, like it's confirmation of something. Then we cut
well,
to
we get immediately into these are creatures.
yes,
Not that this is a machine, which how long was the reveal in the original before we actually got to
it's a
figure out
while.
like halfway through at least, right?
Yeah. I don't know about halfway because they do make a comment about in the episode. It might actually be in the first 6 episodes where they're talking about the Angel core recovery and stuff, and the burns on Gendo's hands, and they make a comment about at the scene Angel DNA being like a 98.9% match or something to humans. So there's mention in the first 6 episodes of that, but this still is coming out pretty early with it.
Well, and we didn't get the like arm hand
Yes, that came
rebuild
later.
until way late. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like episode 15 or something when it's ascending, when it eats the S2 drive and is like ascending. We also get this scene much earlier, Shinji at the hospital that first time, but before he wakes up doing that, we get the scene of Shinji's mom at the hospital talking with Gendo about the name of the child. If it's a boy, it's Shinji. It's Rei if it's a girl. Why Shinji would be dreaming about that, which seemed to be the implication, I don't know. But it's very clearly linking those two together much more so early on, which I was like, okay, so we're really driving that like these two characters have a very direct connection to one another and their importance and everything. Like that makes sense if you're going to try and tell the first 6 episodes in like a singular movie. That's the kind of connection you would need to lean into more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was like a very out of the gate thing. Sele is shields up immediately. Do we ever get to see them as real people in this rebuild, or are they just always shields?
You might get a glance of Chairman Keel, I think, at some point, but they're not physically on screen all that much that I recall. I thought it was interesting too. They, again, a movie thing when you're doing it and it's like 2 hours or less trying to cover even just 6 episodes. I felt like they, and this is a criticism of this, I felt like they blew past Shinji's trauma way too fast in this one. Like after the cranial thing and them talking about like the implication of that, you get like 1 second of him kind of glancing down at his hand, just remembering the broken arm feeling. And that's it. And I was like, I know we got to move, but like him having no struggle with that or like even feeling like Misato comes in, talks with them for a second, and they move on to the next scene because they're like, we got to go. We don't have time to linger here. The original series, because it's a series, had a little bit more time to sit with it, I thought. And so you actually kind of felt like he was wrestling with the broader implication. Remember he goes to bed that night. They have the whole thing about when he's sitting in the bath, like all of that. He remembers seeing the half face of Unit 1, which wasn't shown. And we got the crazy eye for the first time. Like none of that's here. And I was like, I missed that. I feel like for Shinji's initial trauma and like everything, like this is important, but we're just going to have to blow past it because of time constraints. But that's a small criticism I had out of the gate where I was like, I don't like how quick we're moving forward from this.
Yeah, they definitely did brush past that really quick. And I do miss the fact that we got, kind of that view of the crazy Ava. But yeah, it's like I don't feel like you had to do that necessarily either. I mean, like you could have spent 5-10 minutes on that. Now, you say that about everything and then it becomes a 5-hour episode 1. But I feel like that was a really important part about just like being like, whoa, what is happening? But then I also, there's so much of this that it's like everybody already knows everything. Like, Misato with her level of knowledge is just like, whoa, you
Mhm.
okay? You go. I'm so confused right now. You have no secrets that make sense to me anymore. So,
Yep. Um, there's also another interesting note too. As Unit 1 is recovered, they tell us they note that they'll be lucky, or they note that they were lucky, and that the black box wasn't useful during the time basically that it was the battery pack ran out, essentially, right? Like it was disconnected, and from the power down, like the black box doesn't work for them to get much data from that. And I was like, I think that's the first time we've had mention of black boxes on the Avas. That's kind of weird. And I didn't know if I liked that, honestly. I was like, I that it wouldn't work while the thing was going berserk kind of makes sense because it ceases to be more so machine and it almost becomes like more living at that point. It's like that
hmm.
side takes over. But I was like, the black box thing, it makes sense that they would want to install something like that, and maybe that's why they included it. But that was just something that I was like, that seemed strange to me. That struck me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see here.
So,
Oh, yeah. So Gendo commenting that now Unit 1 is assigned to active duty. He's talking to Sele, as you mentioned. And Unit 2 and its pilot are being evaluated for assignment as well. And so that's the first implication of Oscar right out of the gate. Like once Unit 1 was officially assigned to duty, now they're, okay, we have a Unit 2 on standby, and we're basically evaluating our pilot right now, our potential pilot. And then Sele is just straight up speaking right out of the gate about the human instrumentality project and how it's their ultimate goal. And I was like, God damn, we are all cards on the table here early, like going straight into the human instrumentality thing.
yeah, human instrumentality and Lilith are both brought up in that conversation. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what? Okay, cool. Well, that's cool. What are we going to do next?
Yep. Yeah. Let's see. What do you
So it
have
shows the
next? Yeah.
aftermath of the first angel death, which again is another thing that I think was like really doing a great job of showing like the scale of that destruction,
Mm-hmm.
which we didn't get as much in the original series. Like it is intense in this one. You're just like, holy crap! Like
Yeah.
shit has gone down. This is like no joke. So the next thing I've got here is conversation on people leaving town, which I kind of like that we like brought up more of just like here's what the common folk are doing right now. Which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hate in a Godzilla movie most of the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
shut up about the people, give me the monster. But it is nice that they're actually like trying to focus on people a little outside of like the main realm of characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, what are the normal people doing right now? Which you're curious about. It's like there's other people whose lives are getting affected here.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, and they mention it's that the scene reminded them, all the blood and everything from the AT field reminded them of the second impact. But
mhm.
Misato comments that she's hopeful mankind can fight back now because they have the Ava and at last a pilot who can operate it. So I thought that little spark of hopefulness in her was also good. Again, they tell us that she's pretty new to Nerve and everything like that. But I was like, that makes sense that she would have a. She's not as pessimistic about it or whatever, about like what Risuko, for instance, would be, where it's kind of like, we're going through the motions, but we also know this is very likely a losing battle. I feel like there's more optimism in this pretty young Misato here that we're seeing. So I was like, that's kind of welcome. She already seemed a little battle hardened in the series, so seeing her with that optimism I thought was made sense, and it made her motivations moving forward and how she's able to justify sending like a 14-year-old into that situation a little bit more believable of like, okay, I don't like it, but this is how we win. And it's right here. Like, I can't help it. I have to try. Like, we have to
Mhm.
go along and do this thing.
Yeah, and what I really like is that she's not an alcoholic in this rebuild. Because when we get to her apartment, she's only like 35 beers in a couple of minutes,
I was
and
like,
oh wait, yeah. Sorry, I guess she still is.
yeah.
She's a crazy alcoholic. I remember there being a lot of beers, but like when you see
Hmm.
how much they stack up, like, and I assume there's a progression of time happening here, but no joke, there's 35 beers on the table in probably 2 minutes time.
Yeah. Did you notice when they were at the supermarket before, when they were like getting food and everything for the evening, they had very specifically Doritos and what was the other name brand that they had there? Do you recall?
Huh.
Okay, they
I
had
didn't pay
Doritos
that
and
much
some.
attention to it.
It was just like among the items on the shelves at the supermarket kind of place or convenience store, whatever it was. You had Doritos very clearly, and you had something else. Those are there because Hideki Anno, that was like his comfort food while he was like basically holed up in his studio, obsessively working on Ava. So it was like he had beer, he had Doritos, and I forget what the other snack is. I think it's a more Japanese cultural snack or something. But like those are the things he had on hand. So he was like, yes, we can get the clout to get Doritos to do this little thing. We'll do it. I just thought that was a funny kind of touch to it.
That's interesting. I wonder
yeah.
if he got any money from PepsiCo for that one.
I would hope so. Yeah. Misato showing Shinji Tokyo 3 as well, and her talking about how he should feel proud because it's the city he protected as well. Let's see. Doritos. Yeah. I'm just like looking through my notes. The Pin introduction is kind of the same, but they tweak the dialogue a little bit. Again, we have the thing where Shinji's like going to take a bath. Pin comes out. Shinji like freaks out, runs out there. We're doing the hiding his crotch behind the bottle. Then you get the second reveal that you move the bottle and it's an even smaller bottle, but it's still covering up Shinji completely. I think before her line was like, so you going to hide it or are you going to put it away? Something like that. And this one is, what is she? I can't remember exactly what she said. So are you going to like go cover up or something to that effect? But her internal dialogue, instead of like before it was, if I'm not careful, he'll see right through me. Instead, she was like, maybe I was too cheery, but it's all I could do to keep a straight face. I thought that was better. The first one to be like, after that scene and be like, oh, I'm laying it on too thick. He's going to see right through me. I'm like, that's a weird reaction to him freaking out, running out there naked. Like, it makes more sense to be like, that might have been a little bit of a cheesy line, but it's all I could do to keep a straight face was just to like crack some sort of quip or something, you know, like I was like that. I thought that was a dialogue tweet that made sense at least.
Yeah. And we just totally gloss over the fact that Pin knows how to read.
And they changed his thing too. He's like an actual species of bird instead of like an experiment. Like I think the original series said.
He was a nerve experiment.
I don't know if it's nerve or what, but there was some sort of thing the original series made reference to that made it sound like he was not a natural occurring species. Whereas in this one, they're saying, I think he is. That's something I read somewhere. It was not a detail I picked up on in my viewing. That was something I read a while back, and I was like, oh, okay. But they did something different with Pin's origin here compared to the original series, from what I understand.
Yeah, he's an interesting little creature. I mean, whatever. I don't care about Pin. You hear that?
I don't. I don't
care.
Either.
I don't give a shit about Pin. So we get into the Berserk Unit 0, and I feel like we did a lot more to show like how difficult it was to restrain this thing. I mean, it's in cuffs. I think it's probably in what's that fluid they put on everything?
Oh my god. Holy shit, my brain just went blank on that. LCL.
Is it? No,
LCL.
It's not LCL. No
LCL.
way.
LCL.
I don't believe you. LCL is what's in the thing.
Repeat your question then, because
it's the stuff that like turns everything into like a brick. Essentially, it's like what they flooded the facility with.
Oh, yeah. I still don't have that off the top of my head either.
So, anyways, there's Bakelite.
Yeah, Bakelite. There you go. Yeah.
So there's Bakelite all up to its legs. It's got handcuffs behind its back.
Yep.
And its entry plug is like sticking out with there's like a cross or something too, if I remember correctly. I had said that there was a cross sticking out.
Yeah.
And I think it got stabbed or something in the back, something like that. But I was like, whoa, this is looks a lot more intense than the original one was, where I don't remember any of those details. Where has Shinji been living?
He's already staying with Misato at this point.
Where was he?
You mean like before? And they tell us in the original series as well, he was staying with one of his teachers. Basically, Gendo just like turned him over to one of his teachers at the time. So he was in the city, but he was not kept anywhere near Gendo or Nerve or anything like that.
Yeah, so he's not super far away from where he
Right.
was before.
Yep.
Okay.
Did we pass over? Well, Toji introduced and everything, punching Shinji about the day before because his sister was hurt in that whole battle and everything.
Yeah, I just glossed over all that because
Okay.
it was similar beats.
Yeah. I did like that Misato and Risuko in Shinji's testing thing mention him being beat up at school, and they question if they should increase his security protection. And Misato just says, "Nah, he was never in any real danger, and it would probably be better to give him some degree of self-agency rather than control everything." And they kind of go into the hedgehog's dilemma at that point. That's just a quick throwaway 2-sentence interaction, but I was like, that makes sense that in the original series, they had no issue or no like comment on like their pilot getting beat up at school. I was like, what happened if it was like a sociopath and he like brought a knife on, to try and attack Shinji? Like we're told there is a security detail somewhere, but like if you don't see it and you don't acknowledge it hardly, kind of makes you wonder, like, are they doing much to protect him? So I liked that little line there as a quick little, logical thing.
Yeah. So with the,
are we to the next?
I guess
angel?
it's the second angel at this point.
Which
was
they
this
call
what this?
They call it the fifth angel of the series, by the way. So again, the numbers are different here.
This is what was the first one? The fourth?
The fourth, yep. Because they're already acknowledging Lilith, but they're also acknowledging the second impact was Adam. So then the first one we see in this movie is the third, and this is the fourth. Whereas in the other one, it was like the 6th and 7th or something weird like that. But really... it's the Lilith thing that's changing the numbers for the most part.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out my coffin theory that I'm about to get into.
Oh, all right.
Anyways, we'll go forward. So yeah, did this angel look like this originally? Because I don't remember.
I think they tweaked its design a little bit here. It was similar, but I think they did more with it here. Like it's the shapes it changes into, I think, are much more unique here, and I think that's just them playing with the effects and everything they had, the budget.
Yeah, when the entry plug comes out and he lets the two boys into it, I just thought it was so funny that it has this little like
ladder. Oh yeah.
I'm just like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And I don't think we even went over how they got in the cockpit in the first one. I think it was just
jumped to it.
Hey, you're in here now. But the fact that they included that, I was like, maybe should have just left that out. That's
we could have done with that being cut out. We don't need to. You're not even gonna show them climbing it. So why show us the thing being lowered? Like
yeah. That looks like a Dr. Seuss book made that part up.
Yeah,
it's very strange.
It's like the old 90s screensaver where you have like the bending pipe thing, and it's like 3D space just going around and around until it eventually fills up everything, and then the thing just resets. That's kind of what it felt like the style of the movement. Again, when the angel attacks, you have the military trying to fight it. The people with nerve are just kind of commenting that it's a waste of taxpayer money and everything. Again, world building makes sense that the military UN would still be kind of involved, but they're very much becoming aware of like, we're not equipped to deal with this. It's very clearly got to be this team doing this.
Yeah, and after, so when Unit 1 is fighting, he grabs the whips and the hands on his Ava turn into human hands, which I was thinking that happened in the first battle, and maybe I'm incorrect. Was it an arm?
Hands.
What happened with he like used a part of the angel to like rebuild himself?
That was in the first angel attack of this.
But there was no human element to it.
Right.
Okay. I was getting my battles mixed up. So Misato has a conversation with Shinji. I don't even remember what took place, but then she like slaps herself in the face, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, just kind of like bad Misato, like that sort of thing. Like she knows she basically didn't handle it all that well. So let me jump to that line there and see what my note was.
She seems very, not that she didn't seem caring in the original one, but I would say even more caring in this one, and like concerned with his well-being and like really focused on him.
Yeah.
Like even I feel like her motherly instinct is like ramped up even more, which I like. I like that she's like, she's not just trying to analyze him. She is, and she
Yeah.
knows what's going on with him. Whereas in the first one, you feel a little bit like she's trying and failing. She seems to kind of like know what's in his brain, most like she knows where his thoughts are at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get the feeling that, again, because she knows she's having to force him into this situation because she sees suddenly the hope against the Angels and like, oh my God, maybe this could be a winnable thing. I think it's kind of like the whiplash in the other direction where she realizes like, this is really messed up what we're doing. And it's very clear it's having a very bad impact on him. And so it's almost like the compensating in the other direction, but it's also that understanding and realization to your point. So like when she's asking him, like getting on to him about disobeying her orders and everything, he's just kind of like, whatever. And she gets pissed and he's like, what does it matter? I won. I'll pilot it if you want me to. That's all you care about, right? Yeah, and she goes like she's going to strike him, which she did slap him, if I recall, in the original series there. And instead, she just departs without really giving away much feeling or whatever. It's kind of hard to read. And then you cut to him on the train again, surrounded by strangers, just kind of cycling through tracks on his Walkman or whatever. So I liked that interaction because it makes sense that she's kind of like having to see and the impact and like the consequence of all this and what it's doing to him. And it's like forcing her to like deal with that reality and like realization of like, oh yeah, right. Just a kid. This is horribly scarring him and messing him up. He very clearly had an almost like PTSD type response in the cockpit. This is not a good thing to be doing, but we don't know what to do. At least I can try and be a little more understanding and kind about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the next thing I had here is a line that Futsuki, whatever.
Fusuki,
Yeah, makes, and he says, children with predetermined fates. And I liked that line, and I don't recall hearing that line originally, or maybe I just glossed over it.
I don't recall it either. I liked it as well. I think I made a note of it.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
And then they talk about
Has Shinji
Ray.
run away yet?
I don't know.
They jump to Shinji's runaway, but instead of being found in like a field, he's like literally sleeping in like an alley outside a movie theater, which I was like, that's interesting. I guess they're trying to keep him grounded in the world to show like, oh, there's a movie theater and people still go to the movies. And I don't know. It was an attempt at a world building thing, but I was just like, that's a different choice. I guess it kind of makes it feel more grounded, but I don't know. It just makes Shinji seem like the homeless person sleeping under a newspaper in an alley or something.
I mean, I wish he was homeless. Get out of this stupid show.
Yeah.
So there's some mention. My next thing, which
we can jump ahead a little bit if you want.
I pick random beats. There's a conversation about Ray being picked up by the Marduk Institute, which I'm like, Marduk Institute too feels incredibly quick to mention, and the fact that Ray's even mentioned being associated with Marduk. I don't know. I like it. I like that everything's just out there.
Yep. Yeah. I thought it was interesting the idea that Gendo and Fuyusuki later on are kind of talking about like the plan being, and they make the plan like they make a comment that like the plan now that Shinji and Rei are kind of starting to get to know each other a little bit better. The plan is to have them get even closer, just as they arranged 14 years earlier. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a different kind of chess match. We didn't really get that impression in the original series. We just assumed like, oh, they're the only two pilots. Of course, they're going to have no one else to go to try and find common ground other than each other. So it was kind of a natural thing. This makes it feel much more like Gendo's being chess master behind the scenes and even kind of directing them towards each other, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, there was another question I had. Getting back to Unit 0, and maybe we addressed this in the first one, and I'm just asking a question I already know the answer to. Why did Unit 0 go berserk on Rei? Why is it fighting her?
I don't know that they ever gave us the clear answer on that. I really don't have a clear answer. Like I've tried to think about that a little bit too, because Unit 0 is the prototype. So it's the prototype based on, initially we were told Adam, but we find out no, it's actually Lilith that was down there. So it would have been based on Lilith and having the soul of Lilith inside Rei. And so maybe initially before it was like calibrated, it was almost like a part of the body or a synthetic part of the body with the soul back in place, Lilith herself raging to an extent. Like maybe it's almost like an artificial Lilith to that extent. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the line here? There was some interaction at like a swim class thing. We got an explanation about Ray's backstory and the injuries she suffered. Gendo rescuing Ray, burning his hands. We know about that.
His emotion there was
Different too.
very different.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I always get on to Gendo's character for being like very cold and calculated, and like I never even believe he has a love for Yui,
Mm-hmm.
he seems genuinely distraught, like
Yeah.
way beyond anything he showed in the actual like OG series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when he asks her if she's all right, she seems to say something, and then he just replies, "I understand." And I'm like, "The fuck did she say?" Like, there's no captions or anything. Like, I didn't hear anything. Were you able to make it out?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I was like, the series. Every now and then, Ava will pull some shit like that, and I'm like, I fucking hate that because there's too much other shit going on in this universe to then figure out like retroactively if you do give us the answer. And then other times it's just like end of Evangelion with Risuko's death, and you're like, I don't know. It's open to interpretation. Really knows? It doesn't really change much. It's almost just like a mystery for mystery's sake, you know? But yeah, so they're talking about Misato expresses some concern over reactivating Unit Zero, which is obviously the plan at this point. And Shinji seeing how Rei and Gendo interact, he's amazed and envious and everything. Just seeing her having the relationship with his father that he kind of wants. You also get an after work trip to the bar or whatever with Risuko and Misato, and they're talking about that whole living arrangement and everything. Misato's baffled by Gendo's lack of care and affection towards Shinji. Like there's a point where he's leaving the hospital and like the elevator door opens and it's Gendo, and they just stare at each other for a minute until the door closes again. Gendo never said a word. He's almost just like, it's almost like he sees Shinji's out of bed and he's just like, all right, good. But he doesn't even say or like look relieved or anything. The doors just close again and he leaves, and it's just like, all right. Like, what a weird thing. And Risuko just says powerful men are always self-absorbed. But Misato is like, I don't think that's it. And then we get the whole setup again. Shinji has to take the ID card there, which feels like this is Gendo through Risuko doing his chess piece thing. Like, go walk in on her while she's naked. This is how I bring you two closer together. Like, never mind that it's a clone of your mother. Don't worry about that now. Just grab the boob and you guys will be closer. Like, just, it's weird how much that still follows like the same beats of the original one there. I'm just like, I guess they liked this setup because they didn't really adjust anything to it.
I feel like this one wasn't as awkward though. Like,
This
I don't know. I feel like their interaction, like, it was different in a way that it wasn't like quite as drawn out. It wasn't quite as like awkward. You know, it seemed to move pretty fast.
I
And
think
Ray was like,
he has more annoyance that comes through, and so she feels less robotic, and that probably helps it.
yeah, she's like, "Are you gonna get off me?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "Yep, I am."
And then as he's explaining himself, she just like leaves. She's just like and it's not like in a like, this doesn't seem important kind of way. It's more like a, I don't care to hear it sort of thing. Like, it seems like she almost storms out. So this Ray is different and has more personality, but the beats as far as the setup of why he's there, the falling forward, grabbing a boob, all that is exactly like that. But you're right.
I don't even remember him grabbing a boob.
His hand's on her boob.
Did you notice that she didn't slap him in the face?
Yeah, she pulls the glasses off his face, but I always contended that's what happened.
You said that she pulled them off of his face?
Mm-hmm. And I said the slap only happened on the escalator when he said he couldn't believe in his father's work, not a man like him or something. You always thought that she slapped him.
Sworn she slapped him. I gotta look back at this.
Yeah, we had this discussion originally, and eventually I was just like, I don't know, doesn't really matter, but there's at least one slap in there. So yeah.
Hey, all I'm saying is prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
All right. We get that escalator scene, like we mentioned, with the slap. He doesn't believe in her work. She's saying basically she's not afraid of getting back in Unit Zero because she trusts Gendo and his work. Shinji, when asked the same questions, like, of course not a man like him, not a father like him. She slaps him. And then we move forward to the next angel attack, which is the 6th angel. Unit 1 is sent to engage because Unit 0 is still grounded at the moment. They were trying to go do the test to see if it was safe to reactivate, and then the angel showed up. So we get this incredibly brief thing where, just like before, The second Unit 1 comes up, it's blasted with this intense like plasma cannon or whatever type beam that nearly kills it. It doesn't do it as dramatically as it did in the original, but the end result is still effectively the same. Shinji's more or less in a coma while they're trying to heal him, and they have X amount of hours until this thing drills through the surface of the geofront and can just attack Nerve HQ. So we're trying to move quickly through this. Even they're scrambling to get the whole plan with taking all the power from the city of Japan and putting it into this beam. What I do like a lot, instead of letting this be a Risuko plan, they gave all the credit to Misato. They had Misato be the one to come up with a plan. And even Risuko is like commenting on this, almost like, this is so insanely crazy and stupid of a plan, but I'm actually kind of impressed. Even your idea to stabilize the beam through a rifle or whatever. So, they make some comment like that, where it's like, it's crazy, but like that could work. And Misato, I just felt like it gave credit to Misato, where she didn't just look like she looked capable, I guess, in that point, like to the point where even from like an intelligence standpoint, even Risuko was like, you know what, I got to give you credit. That's a hell of a plan. It's very gunslinger like, but I think it could work. I think you're onto something.
Yeah, the scenery they used for like where the Ava was shooting from too, you can tell is like way different. Like in the original one, if I remember correctly, it was like kind of outside. There were like generators or something nearby, so it was like it kind of looked like a janky setup. But this one was like very like well thought out. He's in like a warehouse. Like it just felt very, I don't know. I just liked how it looked a lot more. It felt like a really cool setup.
Yeah.
And
they brought them back down instead of just lowering the elevator again. They had to like jettison like a city block, basically, like because they can lower the city up and down depending on the threat. They just had to like basically like blow the connectors for like a city block to all drop down because the elevator wasn't working. And I was like, that's really cool. I do wish they had shown us kind of the destruction fallout of all that stuff crashing down to the ground like an elevator, basically. But I was like, that's kind of cool. That adds to the whole thing that there's this huge whole city block that literally just disappears, and there's a giant hole in the city now.
Yes, I totally forgot about that part, and that was very cool.
Yep.
That's definitely not something we ever got in the original series. Yeah, so this, I don't know, this whole like fight starts out, and this was the Dragon Ball Z-esque, like when he's in the cockpit, and I was like, I'm loving this. Like, I love how he's getting attacked right now. It's so cool. And then we get, so Masato's like very obviously concerned about Shinji. Really like showing these like motherly instincts, like very like protector, which she always is a little bit of, but I think we're like really dwelling on it in this. And then we get a mention of the dummy plug, which was very early to have that conversation as well. Trying to think, I want to make sure I'm not glossing over any of this fight that's happening.
I liked there's a note in there that the Misato and Risuko are talking about the UN's policy is that if the angel reaches the geofront, Nerve has to initiate its self-destruct sequence in order to avoid data loss or information loss. And Misato calls the plan short-sighted and foolish. But I was like, again, interesting that they have some oversight still from the UN and that they would have to adhere to certain things like this. Like just little things like that I thought was kind of interesting. Now, obviously, for what we know of the claims of like what would start the third impact, that's probably the actual reason. But I did like the explanation, the in-world explanation. I was like, just little nods like that I'm like, that would logically make sense that they would have to do something like that.
So when Rei meets Shinji in his dream, is this Rei 2 or is this Rei 3?
That's a great question. And that's the bitch about Quantum Ray is you don't really know. I honestly don't know, because I watching this scene had the same thought. I'm like, well, now I know it's Ray 3, Quantum Ray, at the start that he sees in the city before Misato first picks him up. So now I'm having to wonder, like, is this her here as well? I don't know. And going through the conversation, I can't really say. I kind of feel like it might be, but I don't know definitively.
Yeah, and we know that, an angel has the ability to kind of like incept your mind a little bit like this. So I think either one would have the capability. I guess the real question would be, would Ray have a need to have that conversation with him, knowing how everything is going or has gone?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. Again, this is where you get into like the butterfly effect almost of the rebuilds, where you're like, if this conversation did play out differently, or if it didn't happen at all, would this have messed up everything of whatever is supposed to happen? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we get into this conversation that Shinji and Misato are having, and there's also a scene in here where they hold hands. I don't know if it's when they're going down to the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
but at some point in time they're holding hands, which is interesting. It's not like a sexual thing, though.
Right.
It's more of like a
I'm here for you.
"I'm here for you." Yeah.
Yes.
And she explains the second impact and the third impact to Shinji. She says we kind of have that conversation with him where he's, just getting on to her like, hey, you want me to do all this shit? You don't realize I'm the one in the cockpit and I am the person in danger. Like,
Yep.
I am trying to help you, but like, you have to understand that my job here is very different from your job.
Right. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting her like taking him to see Lilith, and the Lilith is a little bit redesigned as well. The mask is different. The legs on like the human looking legs coming off the nubs of the Lilith legs are like twitching. I was like, oh, that's kind of creepy and unsettling. Very much driving home that this thing is still alive. But yeah, the hand holding thing was a very interesting change, especially when we know how like episode 23 went when she tried to hold his hand and he was like jerked away and was like, don't touch me, just don't. So like here it was kind of like, oh, I don't know if this is like intentional of like, okay, that trust is still here and it hasn't been broken yet. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on. I don't know. But the symbolism of hands and eyes are both big with Ava and Anno's work in particular.
Yeah, so when she takes him down to the facility, she mentions nothing. That this is level triple E, which I don't think matters at all. But she says that the facility will self-destruct if an angel gets to this point. We see Lilith, and then she tells him that he needs to guard Lilith, which is so cool because this whole time you're like, you're fighting these angels. We can't really explain why. All you need to know is that you have to stop them. And if you don't, everybody dies. But this one, it's like, no, you're bodyguard.
Yep.
This is the person you're guarding.
This is the target. This is what you must defend. Yes, exactly.
Which feels like that would have made things a hell of a lot easier knowing that information in the first place.
Even if they had kept the Adam charade up, it would have made sense.
Do we get to see, skip ahead, do we get to see Kaji at any point?
Not in the first one.
Second? Third?
Yes, second one.
Okay.
He's introduced in the second one, 2.22.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a note here on this. So going back from their conversation here, explaining her bond. Wait, no, that's Ray talking there. So yeah, her gripping his hand, he reciprocates. Then we're back at the rendezvous point. So Shinji has agreed he will try and do this mission. The plans are laid out, but he has this, just like episode 5 and 6, I guess it would be 6. He's having this chance where he's sitting there on this platform with Ray, and he asks her why she pilots the Ava. She explains it's her bond to everyone and that she has nothing else. Before Shinji can ask more, she just says it's time to go and says goodbye. And Misato kind of reading Shinji well here. Wait, did I move that line? I think we get just the voiceover of him remembering like the end part of that conversation with Misato, basically saying like, regardless of whatever the outcome is, she's grateful to him for trying.
Yeah, thanks for trying.
Yeah, and I was like, that's a good note, and it is expressed in other ways, even in End of Evangelion. But I was like, that's a good way to like free someone from the burden of the outcome. Like, if you're overwhelmed for the idea of even having to try this horrible thing, just saying like, look, just by trying, I am incredibly grateful to you, no matter what happens. I was like, that's a really good way to try and at least take the pressure off of him somewhat, alleviate his mind as he goes and tries to do this insane thing.
Well, this is like a supported version of Shinji too, because Kaji leaves a message on his phone as well as some of his friends, and they're like, hey dude, you can do this, like Koji. You got it, you're gonna crush it. I think Kaji and Toji leave a message, if I remember correctly. It
Kaji
starts
is
with
Misato's
Kaji.
boyfriend, and Kaji hasn't been introduced yet. So it's Glasses and Toji. I don't remember. It's not Kaji. Kaji is the name of Misato's boyfriend.
Was it Toji? I could have sworn
It's
you said
Toji and the
Kaji
kid
on
with
the machine.
glasses.
Okay, yeah.
His name is also with a K, but I can't think of it. That's why I always just call him Glasses. It's like Kinsuke or something.
Because we don't care about him. You hear that, Kinsuke? We don't care about you.
Not for
we
that
barely
character,
even remember your name.
I had a note here too that the Angels purple laser attack it fires against the planes in the city. Do you remember like the split beams like circling through all the ones and destroying it? That shit is so reminiscent of Shin Godzilla's dorsal plate attack in Shin Godzilla that came out in 2016. I was like, oh, I see where he drew from his own inspiration here. This is 2007, and I was like, that shit is straight Shin Godzilla, and in that badass atomic breath scene. But yeah, I immediately like wrote that, circled it. I was like, that was pretty awesome.
Speaking of Godzilla -1 coming out soon,
I'm fucking excited. I'm actually in the early reviews look really good. I'm so excited. I liked the idea that you have all the citizens of Tokyo 3 kind of watching Shinji's attack with bated breath. Like people are like watching the news and like hearing like, okay, here's when the power down's going to happen. And they're all just like hopeful and seem like positive. You know what I mean? Like just things like that with the world building where you get this sense of like other people and like what their attitudes are towards what's happening. I was like, this is a nice kind of way to wrap it up and not just make it feel like there's Nerve headquarters, a school that's basically its training ground and nothing else in the city matters, which is all it was in the original series. Here you actually have this idea of like businesses and commerce and like ordinary people who aren't tied to Nerve. So I really like that element there.
Yeah, and this alien does not F around. Like, it is way beyond the one in the first series. It can do all kinds of different things, including screaming.
Mm-hmm.
It can make laser beams. It can make bomb. I mean, it's just like, this thing's nuts. Like, it's all over the place. Very cool.
Yep.
So we get this.
I like that Shinji does freeze for a moment and Gendo starts to call for him to be replaced, calling him useless. And Misato stands up for him and like basically is like, if you're ever going to have faith in your son, like let this be the moment. I was like, that's a good Misato moment for there as well. And again, I do like having Shinji still addressing and having to push through that trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they take the first shot. It turns into this like spiky mess and then looks like it's going to die. And then blood is just shooting everywhere. And then, oh, nope, it's not dead. It's coming back. And the reaction it has, again, as I've said a million times in this episode already, talk about scale. Like, this shit just got real. Like, and this is where I said, these fights are so much more intense. We are at Godzilla level stuff right now. Like, this is awesome. So I'm digging this just from the sheer like level that we have moved on to as far as like fight scenes.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Yep. So
and Shinji gets wrecked. He looks physically wrecked, which we know like, okay, if you're in the suit, you're pretty much safe from a lot of things at least. But you aren't thinking about the fact that like that suit might be safe to an extent, but it also feels feelings like just like when his arm got ripped off or when he gets stabbed in the head or whatever happens, like you still feel pain. So having a bomb explode in your face and then you see his skin as like this like pale purplish color, like he felt like he just caught on fire. And we're just, watching him kind of go through these emotions and like freak out because a bomb just exploded on him. And that's what it feels like in his body right now. So it's like we really are getting a sense of like how it feels to pilot this more than ever.
Yep, for sure. So the Angel goes to do its counterattack. Ray jumps in front with a shield. Has to hold the line for like basically 20 or 30 seconds with a shield just insufficient to hold up against this like positron cannon or whatever it is. And Shinji has to line up another shot, is able to do it, kills the thing. And I liked this element too. Unit 2 is too melted for the entry plug to eject. And so Shinji has to like literally rip it open and then like rip out the pod and like with his what is that knife they call it? It's like the prog knife, has to like slice it open. I was like, God damn, Shinji is very adept and comfortable in this, because I would be like like trying to like peel it, you know, like I don't want to hurt you, but he's like no time to act. He's just like reacting, or he's not thinking about it. He's just reacting, and he's like his skill is actually showing how adept it is in that. Which I was like, oh, okay, well, that was pretty cool. So kind of like before, Shinji basically is like checking on her, making sure she's all right, mirroring that Gendo scene she had earlier. And he's like, you can't just say something sad and then goodbye like that and run off. Like, of course, someone cares about you. Like, I care about you, like that sort of thing. And so you're like, okay, largely the standard ending to episode 5 and 6, right? Nothing crazy beyond that. And then we drift to the moon for an interesting reveal. Speaking of things that were a very late reveal in the series that are suddenly just like, okay, first movie, here's this reveal. You know what I'm talking about, I'm guessing, yeah?
Where Kaoru is coming out?
Kaoru is on the moon and introduced in the first movie. He sits up from a... first of all, it looks like there's like a base there, basically. But he essentially sits up from what looks like a coffin and like a ring of coffins around.
The 5th open coffin, and there's 4 that are still shut. These numbers I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah. And at the middle of all of this is the body of Adams. And so you've got apparently like a moon base, multiple caskets. Kaoru sits up, looks both directions, and basically comments on... oh, okay. Like he's basically speaking to Shinji almost in his way of like, all right, here we go again. Like that sort of kind of feel to it. And you're just like, wow, that is that is a very intriguing thing there, where not only is he in the mix much earlier now, but he's like acknowledging again this idea that like all of this has happened before and is continuing to happen. He's already gone through, like you said, like 4 cycles of this, or this is the 4th cycle. And so it's kind of like, all right, interesting. I want to see where this goes. It's a very interesting kind of, I don't know if cliffhanger is the right word, but just a teaser almost of the next movie.
So this is Adam he's looking at?
Adam is what's in the middle.
I'm so confused. What are the coffins?
They're all Kaoru.
It's his 5th iteration?
Mm-hmm. History is repeating. Cycles of time. They're all Kaoru that rises. So he knows Shinji, who he is. He knows what their destinies are meant to be, but how it goes down can differ.
I'm so lost.
You actually see Adam's body here, because you never actually see Adam's body in the original series beyond the old security footage tape or the thing in Gendo's hand, the little embryo thing. So, yeah, a lot of interesting questions here. This movie's better than I gave it credit for initially. Even going back into this rewatch, I was like, whatever. But I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It's still, of the Rebuild series, maybe my least favorite, but that's not to say that it's bad. It's just there's too much where we're just having to set up familiar stuff, even though they raised intriguing questions. Of the rewatch value, I think 2.22 is, I think, my overall favorite in the Rebuilds. And then it's there's a lot of interesting stuff, but this is the one that feels the most familiar. And so I'm like, I like it, but it's not going to be the one that I look to most often. Usually I'll either revisit the series just so I can eventually get to End of Evangelion, or I'll drop into like 2.22 or even Thrice Upon a Time.
Mm-hmm.
So final impressions, notes before we wrap this up. We've been going a lot longer than we thought we would. I think part of it is just how long it's been since we actually recorded one of these. We had more to talk about and engage with.
No, I think that's it for me. It was good.
Yeah.
I like it. I want to see how things are going to go. And I feel like you're going to have to pull out some pretty serious new stuff if you want the same type of like reveal impact that you kind of had with the original series. So I'm excited to see like what's going to come down the line, because I feel like it's got to be crazy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would have held some of that stuff back again.
Yep, I agree. I really like where this direction's going to go. It's good. I enjoyed it, and and I'm looking forward to 2.22 for sure. Like I said, it's probably my favorite one of the series, so we got that to look forward to of the Rebuild series. But yeah, those are our takes. You may think them cheap, but to you, we say, fuck off, it's our podcast. So we'll be watching that. Probably try to record if we can. Thanksgiving is next week, so probably not next week, but something soon after that. Maybe we're able to
Sometime.
Sunday or something. We'll get it done.
We'll figure it out.
But till next time, guys, I've been Derek.
And I've been Matt.
Peace.